Good morning. Congratulations to all of you. You have probably heard the phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, if that formula is true, Brandon Stanton has inspired 1 million descriptive terms about the inhabitants of America. A former bonds trader, Brandon Stanton started the photography blog Humans of New York in 2010 and has since provided a worldwide audience of nearly 20 million people with daily glimpses into the lives of strangers in New York City. In 2013, a compilation of these stories and pictures became a #1 New York Times best-selling book. And today, HONY is the fastest growing arts and humanities page on Facebook. Brandon has also used Humans of New York as a platform to draw attention to and raise money for various causes. His first crowdfunding campaign raised over $1.4 million to establish a new scholarship fund, summer's activities, and yearly college field trips for the students of Mott Hall Bridges Academy in Brooklyn. At 50,000 donations and counting, the campaign broke Indiegogo's record for most contributions to a single campaign. And only a few weeks ago, Humans of New York launched its 8th crowdfunding initiative platform to raise $1 million for pediatric cancer research for the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. I encourage you all to search for the campaign of Indiegogo's generosity website when you get home today. Stanton's third book, HONY Stories, was released in October 2015 and was on the New York Times bestseller list within 2 weeks. Please direct your attention to the video screens.
I moved to New York with 2 suitcases and a goal of taking 10,000 photos. You know, I didn't have money to go out, I didn't have money to go to bars or anything like that. All I did all day long for about 6 months was photograph. That's all I did. One day, I started a page called Humans of New York. We started getting 1 new fan a day, 2 new fans a day. And I said, forget everything else. This is what's working for me. I think, we walk down the street and we see all these people and we do kind of wonder about their stories. The celebrations and the victories, and that's what people are engaging with. What I really hope to maintain is the culture of positivity, of celebration and support that these people share.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming your 2016 commencement speaker, Brandon Stanton.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This is something. This is really something. And I'm going to talk to you guys in a second, but for everyone up here, if you're not very familiar with what Humans of New York is, I basically stop random people on the streets of New York City and I learn their stories. I do about 45-minute interviews with just random strangers on the streets of New York, and I've been doing this for about 5 years now, and I've learned about 10,000 stories. And I want to tell you, it's a real big honor for me to be here today, because especially when the president told me that 60% of these students are the first in their family to graduate from college. Because I've learned over 10,000 stories from people in New York City. And I'm about to tell your children to do exactly what they want to do with their lives. To choose the work that they want to do, to spend their time how they want to spend it. And I know that so much of the reason that they have the opportunity to do that is because maybe you didn't spend the time exactly how you'd wanted to do it. That you made sacrifices, that you let go of some of the things that you might have wanted in your life so that they would have this opportunity. And I want to start just by thanking all of you for this. Congratulations. This is very exciting. So I want to start by telling you guys my story. About 5 years ago, I was working as a bond trader in Chicago. I was working in finance. And things were not going well at all. Not at all. It became apparent that I was probably going to lose my job. And I was just terrified by this possibility. I was just obsessed with the thought of keeping my job. How am I going to do it? Because I didn't have a straight path through life. You know, I didn't go to the Ivy League school and land in this fantastic job. I actually flunked out of the University of Georgia. I went and lived in my grandparents' basement, thank God they let me do that. I rode public transportation to community college. I got my grades back up. I went back to the University of Georgia, and then I started doing well. Then I got my grades up. And just through a stroke of luck, I was a history major. Yeah, history, love it. So many of my hobbies have passed out of my life because of Humans of New York. I'm just too busy. History is the one thing that I've held on to. I love it. I just love it. Gotta have to give my shout out to my history people here. So I got my grades back up. And just through a stroke of luck, I had a friend who had gone to an Ivy League school and who had studied his finance the entire life, who got me this amazing job trading bonds. And I was so worried about keeping that job because it made me so proud to go home to my family on Thanksgiving and on Christmas. You know, the same family members that I kind of had to sheepishly look in the eye a few years earlier and told them that I'd flunked out of college and I didn't really know what I was going to do with my life. It made me so proud to be able to go back there and tell them I had this exciting job in Chicago. You know, I was trading fixed income securities. It sounded exciting. And so I was so worried about losing that job. All I thought about were the markets. For 2 years, all I thought about were markets. I could be in the front row of my favorite band, and I would still be thinking about what the markets were going to do on Monday morning. And then suddenly I lost my job. That thing that I had been so scared of happened. And that was surprisingly a good day in my life. What I was so scared of, it happened. Because I remember taking a walk that day. And I was looking back on the past 2 years. And I was looking forward. And suddenly I realized that all of those thoughts and all of that energy that I had put into keeping that job, why? Because it was prestigious, because it made me feel proud of myself, because it made me feel like I had come so far from being a failure when I had flunked out of school. I had worked so hard on those 2 years to keep that job that it was all I thought about, and now I lost it. And suddenly all of those thoughts I could put towards whatever I wanted, to figuring out what I wanted to do. And I look back at those 2 years, and the whole purpose of those 2 years was to make money. You know, I had this narrative that I was telling myself that, eventually I'm going to follow my passion. Eventually I'm going to pursue my dream, but I'm going to make my money first. I'm going to get some security. I'm going to create some space for me to maneuver, a buffer zone, and then I'm going to pivot. And then I'm going to pursue my dream. But looking back on those 2 years, I had spent all my time and all my thoughts on the prestigious job, and I had nothing to show for it. No money. I got fired. I lost everything. And I realized that no amount of money I could have made during those 2 years would have been worth that time, those 2 years of my life in my 20s. And I realized time is the most valuable resource we have. It's the one thing that no amount of money can buy. No amount of money. Yet how do we use that resource? What do we do with it, this precious time? We use it to accumulate resources that are worth far less. And I'm not just talking about money. Going back to prestige. Lines on your transcript, lines on your resume. Things that you're doing because it's prestigious, and prestige is a resource. And so at that moment, I made a decision that for the next portion of my life, I'm going to try to make just enough money to where I can control my time. It was a reorientation of my life. I'm going to try to figure out to make just enough money so I can choose what I want to do every single day. And at the time, that was photography. I'd only been photographing for a few months at this point, which is really kind of an amazing part of the story for those of you who follow Humans of New York and know how big it is now. It's 20 million followers, 2 #1 New York Times best-selling books. I've been able to interview the president. I've gone to 20 different countries. Started photographing 5 years ago. That's how fast you can build a life. That's how fast you can build a life. And so I made that commitment to myself that I loved photography. I was going to figure out how to photograph all day long. And my first idea, and it was a crazy idea, was that I was going to move to New York City, and I was going to photograph 10,000 people on the streets of New York. The idea was vague. I thought somehow, maybe if I'm the guy, I haven't been photographing that long, so I don't really know how to break into the industry. Maybe if I'm the guy that has photographed 10,000 people and I was going to plot their photos on a map, maybe if I do that, it'll be interesting enough that will draw enough attention to my work where maybe I can then sell photographs and just make enough money to keep going and pay my rent. That's how vague the idea was. And I moved to New York with nothing. I started Humans of New York at the age of 26. I started photographing at the age of 26. I saw New York City for the first time in my life at the age of 26. And I moved here knowing nobody to do this. I didn't go out. I didn't go to bars. I didn't go to restaurants. I didn't go to concerts. I didn't socialize. That's not what I was trying to do with this period of my life. I was going to work as hard as I could at creating a life where I got to choose what I did every single day, and that was photography. So all I did was work. I took thousands of portraits these first few months. It was hard. Nobody thought it was a good idea, taking pictures of people on the street, posting it on Facebook. Nobody thought it was a good idea. That's the hard thing about good ideas. That's the hard thing about doing something new. Because most people are very conservative, and their valuations of something's chances of success are based on things they've seen before. And if you have an idea that you think's new and good, you're not going to get much validation from your friends and your family if it hasn't been done before. So you've really got to believe in yourself for a long time, and it's a lonely time if you're trying to do something new, because the rewards don't come right away. There's so much work you have to do before it starts to pay off, and if you're doing something new, you're going to be doing that work without a lot of encouragement and without a lot of validation. But I want you guys to notice something. I want you to notice that I moved to New York City. I risked everything. No money, everything. To photograph 10,000 people on the streets. And for those of you who follow Humans of New York, I want you to recognize that that looks nothing like what Humans of New York is today. It's not even photography. Not even photography. Humans of New York today is deep interviews, therapy almost, if you guys follow the blog. Very, very raw and honest interviews with a handful of people every single day. The photography's become secondary. The Humans of New York that later became successful looked nothing like the Humans of New York that I risked everything for. If I had waited for the idea for Humans of New York that eventually succeeded, if I had waited for that idea, I never would have started. I never would have got going. You can't wait for the perfect idea. If you're writing notes in your journal, you're sketching in your calendar, the ideas for your business, your book, that thing you really want to do, if you're writing it out in your journal, waiting till it's such a good idea that there will be no risk of failure, until it's such a good idea that your friends and your family are going to say, do it, risk it, go for it. If you're waiting till your idea gets so good, it's never going to happen. You have to begin before you're ready. You have to start before the idea is perfect. You have to trust that you're going to become who you need to be, and the idea is going to be what it needs to be through the work. Work. Such an important word. Work. The Humans of New York that later became successful came out of working every single day. Thousands and thousands of portraits. I realized that it was more interesting if I added a quote. Then the quote turned into longer quotes. Then the longer quotes turned into short interviews, then longer interviews. And then I started traveling. And then I started doing series on inmates and refugees and pediatric cancer now. Hundreds of evolutions that came out of working every single day as hard as I could at making my life the life I wanted to make it. So many people, especially in New York, young people in New York, equate following your dreams with not working very hard. Of finding a life where you can just socialize and have fun and do a little bit every day, practice every few days, call yourself a musician, do one shoot a week, call yourself a photographer. When actuality, following your dreams successfully is nothing but work. Nothing but work. Following your dreams is not working, it's choosing your work. With everything that's happened, Humans of New York, I told you guys about when I first moved, mattress on the floor, nothing in my room. I had no money, nothing on the walls. I slept on a mattress on the floor in a sublease of Bedford-Stuyvesant with 3 people I didn't know for 6 months. And it's been a rocket ship. It finally hit. It was the most exciting thing ever when all of this happened. It validated everything. So much exciting stuff has happened to me. But when people ask me, what is the greatest part of Humans of New York? I say I get to wake up every morning and I get to choose what work I'm going to do that day. I have that freedom. And while I can't promise everybody that they can have a #1 New York Times best-selling book, I have to remind myself that's never what it was about. It was about creating a life where I owned my time and I could choose my own work. And if you commit yourself to that and you're willing to work hard enough, I promise you, you can do the same. Congratulations.
Brandon did pretty good, huh? So we want to honor Brandon with a medal from Kean University, the highest honor we can provide. Thank you. Thank you, sir.